It was a few months ago when my mother asked me to do a small favor. She wanted me to check on my uncle's beach house. Normally, that place is filled with relatives during the summer. Kids laughing, adults grilling outside. The sound of waves, always mixing with the sound of people. But on that particular evening, I was completely alone. The house stood there, quiet, almost too quiet. The salty air felt heavy, and as soon as I stepped inside, I noticed how still everything seemed. No footsteps, no chatter, just the faint hum of the ocean outside the windows. At first it was kind of peaceful. I told myself it would be an easy night. I checked the doors, the lights, and everything seemed normal. Eventually, I made my way into the master bedroom, the one downstairs. That was where I decided to sleep. For a while, I drifted off easily. But deep into the night, something pulled me out of my dreams. It started with a sound, a faint rustle, almost like clothes brushing against each other. I opened my eyes in the dark, frozen in place. The sound was coming from the closet across the room. At first I thought I was imagining it. Old houses make noises, right? But then the sound came again, a shuffle, a slow creak of wood. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't move. It felt like I was pinned to the bed, my chest heavy, my arms numb. It was like sleep paralysis, but I was wide awake then. The closet door opened. I swear, I wasn't dreaming. I saw it with my own eyes. A figure, tall, thin, stepping quietly out of the shadows inside. He didn't say a word. He just stood there, only a few feet away from my bed. I could see his outline against the dim light slipping through the curtains. His head tilted slightly, as if studying me. And then, he moved closer. He stood right next to the bed, looking down at me, silent. Still, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. All I could do was stare, hoping this nightmare would end. After what felt like forever, he slowly turned and walked out of the room. I heard his footsteps moving up the stairs to the higher floor. The moment he was gone, I felt my body release. I gasped for air, jumped up, and grabbed my phone. With shaking hands, I dialed the police. They arrived surprisingly quickly. When I told them someone had been inside the house, they searched every corner, room by room, closet by closet, but they didn't find anyone. One of the officers tried to calm me down. He said maybe I had been dreaming, that my mind was playing tricks in the dark. But then, one of them noticed something. The window on the third floor wasn't locked. The curtains were moving ever so slightly in the night breeze. The officer shone his flashlight out across the roof, and that's when we saw him. A man, bald, dirty, his clothes torn and ragged. He was sitting there, on the edge of the roof, motionless, his eyes reflecting the beam of the flashlight, not blinking, not moving, just staring back at us. The sight of him made my stomach twist. He looked like he hadn't seen sunlight in days. His skin was pale, his expression empty. It turned out he had been living inside the house, hiding, creeping around when nobody was there. And that night, I just happened to be the one unlucky enough to disturb him. The police dragged him down, but I'll never forget the way he looked at me, like I had invaded his space, like I was the stranger, not him. Later, they told me they had found signs he had been squatting in the house for days. Empty food wrappers, blankets tucked away in the attic, even a small stash of water bottles hidden behind boxes. I couldn't stop thinking, what if I had chosen the upstairs room, the one I usually sleep in when the family visits? That was the floor he walked up to. That was the space he had made his hiding spot. If I had been there, if I had been asleep in that bed, maybe I wouldn't be here telling this story. Even now, when I close my eyes, I see him, that pale face, those eyes unblinking in the dark, the silence of a stranger who should never have been there. And every time I think about the ocean breeze, the sound of waves, the smell of salt in the air, I remember that night, The night I learned that sometimes the scariest thing isn't ghosts or shadows. It's the people who hide in the places where you should feel safest. This happened last summer. A friend of mine had invited me to spend a weekend at his family's vacation home. It was a quiet place, tucked away from the city, surrounded by trees and silence. When we first arrived, I thought it was the perfect escape. No traffic, no noise, just a calm little house where nothing bad could ever happen. The first night was uneventful. We had dinner, played some music, and eventually went to sleep. I remember thinking how peaceful it felt to drift off in that silence. But on the second night, everything changed. It was around 2 in the morning when I woke up. At first I wasn't sure why. The room was dark, and for a second I thought maybe I had been dreaming. And then I heard it. A sound so sharp, so piercing, it made my heart pound instantly. It was like the blare of a smoke alarm, high-pitched, constant, echoing through the entire house. I sat up in bed, confused, covering my ears. There was no smoke, no fire, just that unbearable noise filling the air. My friend stumbled out of his room, half asleep, shouting over the sound. We searched the hallway, the kitchen, everywhere, trying to figure out where it was coming from, and finally, I traced it to one of the guest rooms, a room that nobody had been using. The door was half open, and the noise was even louder inside. I stepped in cautiously. The bed was neatly made. The blinds were drawn, but the sound was coming from the pillow. I lifted it up, and that's when I saw it. A small black device, no bigger than my palm. It had a single switch on the side, and a red light that blinked in the darkness. That was the source of the noise. I picked it up carefully, my ears ringing, and flipped the switch. The sound stopped. For a few seconds, the room was silent again. But in that silence, I realized something. That device hadn't turned itself on. Someone had switched it, and that meant someone else was inside the house. My friend's face went pale as the realization hit him too. We didn't waste a second. We locked ourselves in the living room, shoved furniture against the door, and dialed the police. The waiting was unbearable. Every creak of the wood, every faint sound outside, made my stomach knot. I kept staring at the shadows, half expecting someone to burst out at any moment. Finally, the flashing red and blue lights appeared outside. The officers entered, checking every corner of the house, while we stayed close together, our backs pressed against the wall. Minutes passed before one of them called down from upstairs. "All the windows on the 3rd floor are open." I felt my blood run cold. We hadn't opened those windows, and when the police searched the rooms, they found signs of disturbance. Drawers pulled out, closets left hanging open, objects scattered across the floor as if someone had been looking for something. But the intruder was gone. They must have slipped out the moment the alarm went off. Maybe they had been hiding all along, moving silently while we slept. The thought alone made me sick. The police never did figure out who it was. They couldn't even explain the device. They just bagged it, said they'd analyze it later, and told us to stay somewhere else for the night. We didn't argue. There was no way we were going back to sleep in that house. Even now, I can't stop thinking about it. What was that device for? Why place it under a pillow, in a room we weren't using? And who turned it on? It didn't feel like a simple prank. It felt like a message. Like someone wanted us to know we weren't alone. That they had been there, moving through the house while we were unaware. The most terrifying part is that we'll never know what they wanted. Were they planning to rob the place? Were they waiting for us to fall asleep deeper? Planning something worse? Or maybe they just wanted to play with us, to see our fear, to remind us how powerless we are when someone decides to invade our space. I'll never forget that feeling, standing there in that empty room, holding a black device with its red light blinking. realizing that someone had been close enough to touch that pillow, close enough to watch us without being seen, and the fact that we never caught them, that we never even saw their face. That's what keeps me awake at night, because somewhere out there, that person is still free. And sometimes, I wonder if they've done it again, if another family has woken to that same piercing sound, stumbling through their house, only to realize they aren't alone. And every time I try to sleep in silence, I find myself listening for that sharp, deafening alarm, listening for the sound that means someone else is already here. I was 22 at the time, young, naive, still learning what it meant to be careful in a world that can turn dangerous without warning. That summer, a close friend of mine invited our small group of girlfriends to spend a few days at her family's vacation home. It was supposed to be relaxing, a getaway filled with laughter, long walks by the shore, and the kind of carefree fun we all thought we deserved. The first day went by peacefully. We unpacked, cooked a meal together, and then spent the evening down at the beach. The sun had set, but the sand still held the warmth of the day. The ocean breeze was cool, brushing against our skin as we sat in a circle, talking about life, about love, about nothing and everything. That was when they approached us. 3 men, older than us, maybe mid-20s, maybe late. They seemed friendly, at first, smiling, casual. They said they were also staying nearby, in a house not far from ours. They offered drinks, they made conversation. My friends giggled nervously, flattered by the attention. But something about the way they watched us unsettled me. Maybe it was how quickly they tried to charm us. Maybe it was how their eyes lingered too long. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt uneasy. After a while, I told my friends I was tired. I wanted to go back to the house, shower, and sleep. They decided to stay a bit longer, just to hang out. I didn't argue, I just waved and left. I never realized that decision would save my life. Hours later, sometime around 4 in the morning, my phone rang. I jolted awake, heart pounding, fumbling to answer. It was one of my friends, her voice shaking. Frantic, she was screaming words I could barely piece together. Locked, trapped, car, helped through sobs. She managed to tell me what happened. Those men had lured them away from the beach, saying they'd show them their house. But instead, they forced them into an SUV. 2 of my friends were shoved into the back, their wrists tied. They were being taken somewhere. My blood went cold. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the keys to our car, still in my pajamas, and sped out into the night. The streets were dark, almost deserted. But then, in the distance, I spotted headlights, a large, dark SUV, moving fast. I knew it was them, hands trembling on the wheel. I dialed the police, breathless, telling them everything as I tried to keep up. The SUV swerved, speeding through turns, but I didn't back down. Every second mattered. Every second, my friends were closer to disappearing forever. Finally, the flashing lights of police cars filled the road ahead. They cut the SUV off, forcing it to a stop. My car screeched as I pulled over behind them. I watched in horror as the officers dragged the men out, one by one, shoving them to the ground. The back doors of the SUV swung open, and there they were, my 2 friends, tied up, terrified, their faces bruised, streaked with tears, but alive. Alive, I ran to them, my knees almost giving out as I helped untie their wrists. The moment they fell into my arms, I broke down. We all did. The officers told us later that those men weren't who they claimed to be. They weren't renting any house nearby. They didn't even live in the area. They had been watching the beach, waiting for the right moment, and that night, we had been their targets. I think about it often. What would have happened if I had stayed with my friends? What if I had laughed along, agreed to follow those men back to their place? Would there have been anyone left to make the call? Would anyone have noticed until it was too late? The thought chills me. It still makes my stomach twist. That night, tragedy hovered just one step away. One decision, one small choice made the difference between survival and something far darker. Now, whenever I travel, whenever I go out at night, I remember how quickly safety can shatter, how strangers with smiles can hide the darkest intentions. And I never forget the sound of my friend's voice, broken with terror over the phone, or the sight of her eyes, wide and hollow, as she climbed out of that SUV. It stays with me. It haunts me, because I know, if not for luck, if not for timing, we would all be just another story on the evening news. And somewhere, in some cell, those men still sit. But even behind bars, they've left scars. Scars you can't see. Scars that never truly heal.